Thank you, Jay, for yours and the board's support and ongoing support. Staff and I are all over those strategic goals. You know it, first thing tomorrow. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes to speak about some hot-button energy topics for the members in the audience. Each of these concerns encapsulates the three tenets of our business model that I've mentioned in the past that are so critical, that being the delicate balance of rates, reliability, and risks. Speaking first on rates, we've been fielding many questions from members worried about rate increases, and I'm not surprised given there is no shortage of local news articles on the sudden and steep electricity price increases for Ameren customers. To provide the short answer on impact is to say there will be none. In the near term, Menard Electric members are not going to be interrupted by the same disruptors in their rates as Ameren customers. Now, to explain, I'm going to go back in time a little bit and talk about 25 years ago when the investor-owned utilities in Illinois, and that's primarily Ameren and Commonwealth Edison, were deregulated by an action at the state legislature. Now, that act required those utilities to divest of, or in simple terms, sell off their electric generation assets, basically turning them into wires companies just for the transmission and delivery of energy. Now, at that time, Illinois didn't have much company nationwide as a deregulated state, but here I show 2022's map of the country, and they have 13 other states that join them. Those would be those in the dark blue. Those are deregulated for electricity and natural gas services, including Illinois. And then there's others in green. Those are deregulated for electricity only. Now, the energy supply rules differ in each one of those states. In Illinois, Ameren consumers are largely market dependent on their energy supply. Those consumers have enjoyed some really low prices since the 2008 recession, but the fact is that energy prices are on the rise. The fundamental difference for the cooperatives is that we still own our own generation through our wholesale energy provider, Prairie Power. We own part of a large coal plant. We own several natural gas units. We own a small oil-fired plant. We solely own 2 solar farms. We've purchased offtake from a third solar farm here recently, and we've purchased offtake from a wind farm as well. So all these assets, by the way, are located in Illinois, and the jobs created by their operations support the local economies. In short, our suppliers' portfolio is quite diversified, and the costs for this energy and the capacity is embedded in our rate structure. And that's the long answer to why Menard Electric members aren't going to be affected by the sudden price increases that are driven by the market. Switching gears, another disruptor that's gotten a lot of press this summer is the fear by members and the general public of rolling blackouts. Now, this pings on the other 2 tenets that I discussed earlier, reliability and risks. Now, as we join together this evening, the Midwest regional grid operators, they have yet to use their firm load shedding schemes, but capacity shortage alerts have been issued many times, and it would be really foolish to think that those plans aren't being dusted off, for awareness and preparation. So some are asking, why now? What's so different this year? And the short answer to that is supply and demand. On the demand side, energy use is actually increasing as we come out of the pandemic. Businesses and industries begin to ramp back up again. And at the same time, not only here in Illinois, but in other states as well, there's an ever-declining supply of fossil-based generation, whether it be coal-fired or natural gas-fired. Last year, I stood before you prior to the State Assembly passing one of the most aggressive energy bills of its time, which called for stringent restrictions on greenhouse gas emissions from the power plants as early as 2030, with an entire carbon off-ramp at 2045. Now, this legislation has placed an extreme amount of pressure on these plants. Some are considering closing earlier, certainly earlier than they otherwise would have, and probably earlier than required. A significant reduction in ongoing supply was evident from this year's spring capacity auction. The clearing price indicated that the going cost of electric generation capability across the Midwest has skyrocketed from $5 per megawatt day to over $236 per megawatt day. This new auction price went into effect on June 1st. It will be in effect for at least 12 months. And simply put, this cost increase reflects the risk that those plants are willing to take to remain open for just one more year to supply the market. And yet this is another input to the Ameren rates, not the Menard electric rates. But most disturbing, this supply shortage signals that a perfect storm is brewing, and that could threaten the energy reliability that we've come to take for granted. Ultimately, despite the fact that our supplier has all these resources with ample capacity to serve our members, the transmission grid is managed on a regional level. Now that grid, it's a machine, it's an amazing machine, but one key component of it is that it has to have these large-scale generators to be online and spinning so that dynamic reactions can be made to balance supply with demand. For example, if somebody kicks on the air conditioning in here, and thank God they did yesterday because it was really hot, somewhere in the grid a generator recognized, with all else being equal, that that load was turning on, and it increased its generation to match that load. It has to, at every second, milliseconds. They have to make that action. So while wind and solar generation, they're out there and they're online, and I support those sources, but they're not as dynamic as those coal-based and natural gas-fired generation services. To illustrate, this pie chart depicts the fuel mix of electricity production earlier this week in the MISO market. Now, it updates every 5 minutes, but this is a very fair representation of how it looks most of the time. Notice that an even share of electricity generation is supplied from coal and natural gas, coal shown in gray, natural gas shown in blue, about 75% in total. So in theory, in 2045, both those slices would be gone. Now I captured this on a windy day when a fair amount of electricity was coming from the wind power, that's shown in green. About a 10% slice in orange is shown from nuclear power. And it was a sunny day, but yet only 2% of the energy was coming from solar generation. And later in the day when the sun went down, the coal and the natural gas picked that up. I show this to make the point that challenges exist for those who are charged with the responsibility of ensuring that adequate generation is available to serve the load. The air traffic controllers of the transmission grid, they've got limited options when told that they're not going to have any access to coal-fired or natural gas-fired generation in the future. Their last-stage effort during a capacity shortage is to intermittently sacrifice blocks of load on a rotating basis. And while this may seem scary, and deservedly so, this in case of emergency break glass measure is taken and designed to protect the grid at large so that there's not a larger cascading outage or blackout. Because I assure you that larger outage would take a lot longer to recover from than anything that's planned and rotating. And while this perspective might not comfort everybody, I hope it helps to explain why the rolling blackout concept is embedded into emergency planning at the utility level. And at the Cooperative, we've internally discussed our role if such measures are necessary. Now, we're told we'd have little control over where the rolling blackouts happen, because that happens at the transmission level. But yet, what we do know that we have control of is the communications to you, our members, and we can certainly control the restoration to ensure that unintended extensions of that outage aren't occurring when the supply is returned to us. Your Cooperative employees are here, they will and are ready. Believe me when I say there's no better group of engineers, linemen, and service reps than those out there at Menard Electric Cooperative. We're here to light your way. I thank you very much.